There is an ancient story of a student who went to the master and said, "I pray, I study, I meditate, I do my daily rituals, and I even fast a little. I live in peace with others. Teacher, what more can I do?" The master rose, lifted his hands, and stretched his fingers out towards the heavens, when suddenly they became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said, "You can become all flame." Welcome. I am Jareth Tempest, mystic, magician, psychonaut, astronaut, hierophant, all-around seeker of truth, author, full-time weirdo, and host of this show where we will talk about mysticism, the mystic journey, and all that's magical in the universe. Everything from spirits to spirituality, while I take you on a magical mystery tour through the inner worlds and hopefully inspire you to take the next step so that you can become all flame. Alright, well, welcome to this very first episode of the show. As it said in the intro, my name is Jareth Tempest, and I'm going to be your host for this show. Yeah, I am an occult author, practitioner. I'm not a scholar. I want to be clear what this show is going to be, and I think that's what we're going to mainly talk about here on this first episode, is what this show is and what it's going to be in the future, and what we're going to continue to look into and study and explore. I think that the best place to start is with that little story that I have at the beginning of the episode, and that is going to be, well, we're going to return to this story quite a bit throughout the years, I think. So there are so many different interpretations for what this can be. But I think that at kind of almost at its most surface level, let's just start with that one, where you have somebody they're on the spiritual path, and they're doing what they think that they're supposed to be doing and what they've been taught that they're supposed to be doing. And so, they're reading their scriptures, and they're studying their stuff, and they're praying, and they're meditating, and they're doing their daily little rituals, and they're fasting, and they're doing all, like I said, they're doing all the stuff that they're supposed to be doing, but they know that there's something missing, there's something more. So they go to the teacher, and they're like, "Well, what else is there? What am I not doing that I need to be doing?" And the teacher, as teachers are wont to do in these types of stories, doesn't give him a real clear answer of like, "Oh, well, you need to start doing this and do this extra practice to start meditating this way." Instead, he gives an example: you need to shoot fireballs out of your hands. And obviously that's shouldn't be taken literally, that if you can light your hands on fire magically, then that's the goal or something. No, but it just, there's certain, he's describing somebody that's going through the motions of a spiritual practice, but without the fire that you need to have. Like, I see this with a lot of people. They know the technical aspects of a magic ritual or whatever, and they do it, but they don't, and it'll work, but they'll get some results, but it's not going to be great, because they lack that inspiration, that almost that divine spark, or the divine flame within them that's going to really set fire to what they're doing. And this comes out in many different ways. It's like it can be a passion, or it can be a playfulness, and because so many people, they take this stuff all so seriously, and oh, I am a great magician, and I can order cosmic forces around. How awesome am I? I'm going to be a great human god, God man. And it's like, or you could just have some fun with it and play and make some stuff up and just see what happens, and fall in love with the experience of exploring the inner worlds, and meeting these angels and masters and demons and everything. This whole host of characters that are there that want to help us and teach us and guide us and yeah, so yeah, you should never let it just, your practice and whatever it is you do, devolve into just, well, I'm doing the thing, what I've been told I got to do, and the things I think I'm supposed to do. It's like, if you're doing it just because you think you're supposed to do it, you need to stop. I don't care if like your teacher or whatever has always said, no, you do this no matter what. If you're not getting anything out of it, if you're doing it just because, you need to stop, because you're not getting anything out of it, and it's just making it worse, that you're doing it, because then you're going to start resenting the practice. And then you got to swap it up and find another way, something that's going to bring that spark back into your practice. Now, there's a specific time and place where, yeah, you do need to suffer through it. Especially when you're like going through your dark night or whatever. And we're going to talk about that more in another episode. So, I had initially recorded I wanted to kind of introduce myself to you guys and tell you my story. And so I recorded that. That was going to be the first episode, but it ended up being almost like two hours long of just the story without any of the extra stuff I wanted to include. And it was like, okay, this is not a good introduction. I don't want to just hit people with all of that as a first episode. And so I'm going to break the story down into bits, and then we'll use those bits to explain different parts of the spiritual journey. But today what I want to do is I want to talk about just a handful of key moments. These aren't all the key moments of like major milestones of my spiritual journey, but they're really key moments to maybe the parts that you recognize me for and where we're heading, I think. And so I want to begin with Raziel. I think that is just the best place for me to begin anything that anew that I'm starting with magic is Raziel, because it my whole professional career in this kind of began because of Raziel. And so I want to acknowledge what Raziel has done for me and always be grateful, and always remember to go back and be grateful. And so let's talk about Raziel and what happened. So I had been involved in the different various groups, different Facebook groups that were dedicated to the Gallery of Magic. I really enjoyed that community. It seemed to attract a different type of practitioner, people that weren't afraid to acknowledge that they were new and didn't know it all, and it had an experimental feel to it. Like, this is revolutionary stuff that the gallery authors, and then the Power of Magic authors, and these different authors that are doing these practical magic books that contain some really powerful, useful stuff, and they simplify it, and they demystify it, and they take all of the crap that's been built onto these things over the years, and they just give you the basic stuff, and here it is. But now the drawback to that was that they also took away the theory. They weren't explaining why this works or how it works. They were just like, this is what you do, follow these steps and you will get this. Don't worry about what how this works, or what would make this work, or the history of this ritual, or why this don't, or they didn't explain the inner construction of the ritual or anything like that. Just do this and you'll get this, don't worry about it. And it was awesome for kind of getting into a more ceremonial magic thing, because that's not actually something I probably would have ever done. My practice has always been more of a mystical. You might use it started in mysticism, just purely through meditation and prayer, and then and I was working with angels and saints through like novenas, and then devotions, which work similar to a lot of practical magic. You could almost call it like Catholic folk magic. And so that was a part of my practice. But then I was also doing a lot of really deep meditation and prayers and a lot of inner work. And that was the basis of my practice that I've been doing for a decade before I even got involved in anything else. And then that kind of started to become a little bit more of a shamanistic type approach to things, of working in vision, using the imagination to interact with these. There's all these, there's, even within your mainstream religions, there's these practices that people have that you can use, and it goes into these deep religions, not religions, meditations, and where you visualize that you're at these events, and then you talk to the people in the different characters that are in that setting or whatever, and then you can ask them to do things. This is so this is a practice that I was used to doing, and so that was kind of growing. So I'd been doing that, and then at a certain point I was introduced to chaos magic, which came at just the right time because I was really kind of getting bored. I needed something to inject new life into stuff, and now this was like a much more practical magic than what I had been used to. And so I started working with sigils and servitors and that type of thing. But at heart I still liked, I was, it was all kind of just, like I didn't usually draw the sigils. I worked with mantras, so I could still use that in my meditation. And servitors were an interesting thing. That was a fun, I really had fun learning how to do that. I was a lot of experimentation on that. But so I was just, learning all this new stuff and learning about, and then I got introduced to attunements, and I got attuned to Reiki. And the lady that it gave me my first attunement and did that first course in Reiki had introduced me to Ashadi and Ascension and Alchemia. And then that led me to find there's all kinds of different attunements out there. And so I started just buying all these attunements, as much as I could afford it in any one given time. I kind of got addicted to it. So then I started working energetically, and I incorporate that energetic work with my mystical work and that chaos magic work. And then I found the Gallery of Magic, and it's a good introduction to ceremonial magic and working with practical Kabbalah and archangels and demons and Solomonic magic and stuff. And so that was a good introduction to that. And the Facebook communities, the Facebook groups, at least in the beginning, were really good. And eventually things went bad. There were 3 groups. One of them went way bad and became a weird, crazy cult, and they ended up, manipulating and hurting people. The other one, their leader just kind of went a little weird, and he kind of quit taking care of the group, so it just kind of died. And then the third group, it still exists. It kind of took in everybody from those other ones and it just has been growing over the years, and still very active in that one. And that would be the Gallery of Magic Discussion and Experiment group. So, I was in these groups, and I was working through the books, and I've always been really good with these topics and learning them, and I learn them very quickly, and I'm more like a sponge, and I just absorb that. And so I was really, really quickly I kind of mastered these books real quick, and I was explaining and helping people to pick the right ritual to use for whatever the problems were. And I started to do group events where I was you do this ritual, and then we would do this ritual, and this ritual, and they would all build, so that by the time the whole thing was done, you've done this whole series of rituals, and you've accomplished, you've set several things in motion. Usually they involved inner work and outer work at the same time. And so that's kind of initially how I got kind of popular in these groups. But I really, really I loved the community, and I wanted to contribute to the community. And I probably was trying to bite off more than I could chew right at the beginning. But anyway, at some point when Archangels of Magic came out by Damon Brand, it included full evocation for Raziel. I was wanting to work on, I don't even remember exactly what it was. So I did the full evocation with Raziel. It was the first time I ever tried any kind of full evocation. And I didn't get like a full manifestation. I don't think that it really does that very well. But I did get a good connection in my head. Raziel was a lot of fun. And Raziel appears to me as a female. She was very playful and very, I almost want to say sarcastic sometimes, but she definitely kind of would be like, you dumb little magician. You don't even know what you're doing. We had that kind of relationship right off the bat. I got a sense as I'm working with her over the weeks and months that she has something in store for me. Like, and I initially I'm thinking there's these sigils. I'm like, oh, she wants me to create these sigils, and I get all excited. Oh, I'm gonna be able to write a book, and because again, I just really wanted to contribute to the group, and when I say I write a book, I'm not thinking at the time that that anyone outside of the group would ever buy any of that. I never thought that was just I was just doing it for the groups. And so I'm working with Raziel on a fairly regular basis, and I'm trying to get these sigils that I think she's given me, and I do have some. Like, they're still on my blog page, the sigils of Dancing Light. But then I'm having to go and do this full evocation every single time, and it's exhausting. Like, every time I do that ritual, I would be so drained. And finally, I'm like, I really would wish that there was an easier way for us to converse. I guess I should explain, like, around the same time, several months before, this was like in January of 2019, and in 2018, probably late summer or early fall, a book came out called Lucifer and the Hidden Demons by Theodore Rose. At the time, I really hated that book. Like, when it first came out, I hated the book. I didn't like that people were talking about Lucifer so much. At the time, I had real issues with who Lucifer was because of a mistranslation in the Bible. I was like, I don't think that Lucifer is who people think he is, and this is not I'm not isolated in this belief. I know other occultists have made videos and stuff that, hey, there's something weird here. And I've since changed that opinion. I want to be clear that I don't think that there's anything wrong with that book. It's an excellent book, and Lucifer is actually excellent to work with. But anyway, at that time, though, I was not a fan. And I didn't like the technique that it offered, this pathworking thing. It just seemed too easy. It's like, oh, well, this is lazy. People are being lazy. And like all this other, like the gallery stuff is already easy enough as it is. You don't need to make it easier. So I was really kind of had that, like, this haughty kind of, people are lazy and they're not willing to do the work. You know how we can all be sometimes. But anyway, so I'm working with Raziel, and I kind of had that thought. I was like, man, I wish there was an easier ritual for me to do for us to talk. And suddenly I get these images in my head, and I'm like, I think that's pathworking. So I write it down, and I end the ritual, write it down, and I try it. And sure enough, it takes me right back to Raziel, and I'm like, okay, well, that at least it works for me. That's awesome. That's exactly what I was wanting. And so then I sent that to a friend of mine, and he tried it, and he's like, yeah, that worked. And so then I posted it in the group, and other people tried it, and they're like, oh yeah, that works. And then someone else was like, hey, I've got a path working from this other book for Uriel. I'm like, oh, great. And so they share that, and it worked, but it didn't seem to work as good. And then I had the idea, I was like, because one of Raziel's powers is to empower magic, makes magic stronger. Whatever you're doing increases the results. And so I did the path working for Raziel first, and then asked Raziel to guide me to Uriel, and then use that path working, and lit that path working up. It brought it to life. And that was when, like, that was just a major revelation. It was like, oh, this is big. And then then when I discovered that Raziel would give me path workings for other spirits, and it was like, oh, well, here we go. And like, man, I was on fire. And like I said, that happened in January. I put my first book out with the 72 Angels in April, I believe, of 2019. So just, a few months later, I've already put a book out. Now, I admit that maybe I should have done a little bit more research on their powers and stuff, but that book still holds up. The magic works. You might, do more research, get another book to help you figure out what powers would go with it, but it worked good, and everything, and since then, so that was my first big thing that kind of put me on the map out there, is those path workings that I working with Raziel to get those. And Raziel is just such a great angel to work with. Raziel is the kind of legend. The story of Raziel is that Raziel stands behind God and watches everything he does, and has a book and writes it all down. So Raziel knows everything, and is like the angel of secrets, or angel of mysteries. And I love and mysteries and spirituality are not the same as mysteries of like who done it. It's like, how does this work? The mystery of how does anything happen? How was the world created? How will it end? Who created it, and how does that work? What's our relationship really like? And these are mysteries, and so it's not something you're ever going to have a complete understanding of. You just try to get one layer of it, and then maybe try to dig down and get the next layer, and then the next. So there's always these infinite layers to these mysteries, and this is what Raziel will help you with. Get that deeper and deeper understanding of the different mysteries of life in the universe. And Raziel is associated with Chokmah, the Sephiroth of the on the tree of life, it's wisdom. We'll kind of come back to that in a minute, but it's kind of important just to know where Raziel ranks, and the only thing that's above Chokmah is Kether, and so Raziel's pretty high in that chain of emanations. Is very close to divine, but at the same time is so playful and fun and not stuffy and otherworldly. I remember, like, there's a lot of stories, like wisdom has been personified in a lot of different stories and things, and I always had this intuitive feel like as wisdom is a beautiful woman, Sophia, and it's very remote and isolated in a lot of the stories that you read about Sophia. But to me, I always saw wisdom as a young woman with just the biggest smile, the kind of smile that just lights up a room. And that was, and it ends up being very, not the same. It was obviously a very different image in my mind whenever I do see Raziel, but there's a similarity there, and I feel like I wasn't too far off. If Raziel can be kind of thought of as the archangel of wisdom. So, but yeah, like, and so you can almost see that, like, while I was definitely interested in trying to make more money for our business and because we were trying to save up for a house, and I had a lot of mundane things that I was actually absolutely trying to manifest in my life. The thing that I wanted more was wisdom and understanding and knowing how to make how things worked. I've always been so fascinated with the universe, and not in a physical science way, even though that's very interesting and too. It can be fascinating in its own right. But in like kind of the metaphysical sense, like, why are we here? These types of questions, like, why are we here? What is our purpose? What's our do we have an individual purpose for being here? That was the main thing that I wanted to help with. And oh, that's what it was. When I did my first evocation, I was wanting help with astral travel so that I could go and I could go see these different places, the inner world and stuff. And so that's been a struggle on its own. I'll have to talk about that some other time though. And so that was the first big key moment in my, well, let's call it my professional magical career. And so then the next one came, I want to say it was probably August or September of 2020. It was during the pandemic, and I'd been trying to work on another book, but I couldn't. I'm clairsentient, and I feel energy, and I'm like, I guess I'm pretty kind of an empath, and like I couldn't, for all the fear and the anxiety from everything that was going on between the pandemic and the election and the conspiracy theories that were being spread like fire, and all the misinformation, everything that was going on just was really messing with my head, and just the fear that was palpable to me, and I couldn't focus on anything. So I couldn't write that book at the time. So what I ended up wanting, I was trying to raise some money for just something fun to do. So I didn't want to dip into our actual account. Things were a little tight. We had enough, but I didn't want to push things. So no, it was way before. It was probably, because I was doing that earlier in the year, and it was in like September and September when it took off as a thing on its own. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was 2020, and I couldn't work on the book. So what I wanted to do, and I guess what had happened, I told you I had been working with attunements and energy work and stuff, and so when I was working with the Angels of Omnipotence, and I had done a lot of work with them over the course of years, a couple of years. I would work with them. At one point, they gave me an initiation, and when they did it, I could feel it go in my body, and it felt like an attunement, and it kind of clicked this switch in my head, like this idea. I was like, like, so when a spirit initiates you, it's kind of an attunement. It's an energetic link that allows you to channel that energy. And so what I ended up doing was, I kind of put that, I had that information, I'll just kind of let it stew. It was on the back burner for a while. And then my friend Arnold had done an invocation with Lucifer. And I remember I was still kind of pondering this idea, these spirit attunements, and I'd been playing with it, and I'd done a few, but I didn't know what to do with them or how it would work. Anyway, so I did this invocation with Lucifer, and suddenly Lucifer helped me connect these dots in my head, and suddenly I was like, oh, that's it. And again, I was like, it was on fire again. I was like, yes, this is it. This is how it works. And so then I started trying to do it, and I could absolutely make these connections with the spirits and channel that energy. And it works similar to like Reiki, if you're familiar with Reiki, only instead of connecting with Reiki, you're connecting with, like, say, Lucifer, and then you channel Lucifer's energy. And whereas Reiki is a healing energy, Lucifer can be used for a lot more. And so I had to learn different techniques to try to, to manipulate the energy so that it would do different things besides just heal people. And he helped me understand all of that. And so later then that's when I was wanting to, raise some money for this thing. So what I thought I would do was, because I'm an artist, I thought I would paint some like 5x9 altar cards for spirits, and attune the altar card to that spirit so that it would be it would resonate the energy of that spirit. I could attune the paint, and I could attune the thing. I could the whole thing, and it would, so that the energy is built into it, so that it would just forever radiate the energy of that spirit. And I was gonna like sell them for like $50 or something. But at that time, like I said, it was the pandemic and everything was going on. All art supplies was gone, and I couldn't get any paint. And so people had already kind of posted about it, and people were like interested. And finally, my wife was just kind of like, well, why don't you just sell the attunements? And so I was like, well, yeah, I guess I can do that. And so I decided to sell. I just, was like, okay, we'll sell them for $30. Just message me, and we'll set it up. And I immediately got like 11, and had to turn it off because at the time I didn't have a whole bunch of attunements already ready to go. I was going to have to go create the attunement and then give it. And it was a process, and it took a little while. It took several days to go through that and to get all of them out. And then, but I raised the money that I was looking for, and then every couple of weeks, and I would do it again and get some more people. And then as our job kind of ended, I just kind of started doing this more and more full time, and that became my job. And it's still going strong. That's amazing. That was the next big key in that spiritual journey of learning how to make these connections with these spirits, and then to be able to pass that on to other people. And that has been an amazing journey in itself, because it's like every time I do, every day I'm sending several attunements out to people, and creating an attunement, that's a lot of energy. And so the energy, as it builds up and passes through me, the spirits will speak to me, and so they give me all these ideas, and it's like a form of meditation as I'm sending attunements, and they just kind of they speak to me, and they give me these ideas, and have helped guide me on my path and what directions to take and stuff. And it's just been a hell of a ride. And this podcast included is one of the reasons, that's one of the things that they've kind of wanted me to do. They're like, yeah, anyway, so that was really cool. And so I guess the next big thing that happened, so there was this television show, or not television show, there was it was on YouTube, and then it was also on Amazon. It's called Hellier, and it's about some paranormal investigators, and they get involved in some really weird phenomenon. And the show it's interesting, but I liked it not so much because of getting sucked into the mystery, but they had some interesting techniques that they used that you don't usually see. And I was really kind of fascinated with some of the stuff they do. So one of the things they do is called the Estes method. And they get a spirit box, and then they put someone in big headphones, and then they blindfold them so they can't see, and they hear the spirit box, and then the other people will ask questions, and then listen if the response, and the person is hearing the different sound. Because what spirit box is, it goes through radio stations, and it just gives you a snippet of what is happening, and you kind of piece together a message out of those snippets. And that's what the person who's listening is doing. They're just saying whatever they're hearing. Then the other people are trying to communicate with something specific, and then hopefully that entity will use the spirit box to put the snippets together in a way that makes sense, that can answer the questions. And it's amazing how well it can work sometimes. They really do get some very good responses on that show. So that was an interesting idea. And then another thing that they did was they used hypnosis to put someone in a trance, and then used them to communicate with the phenomenon. They did a couple of different things with hypnosis, but that's kind of the one that I was most interested in, because I've learned how to do hypnosis. So, but anyway, I had it reminded me of what the medieval magicians used to do, where usually they were very what we would call left-brained people, very technical, analytical types, and they needed somebody that was more intuitive and more imaginative, and so they would find a medium, and so that they would do the ritual, and then the medium would do the scrying. And you see this with, most famously with John Dee and Edward Kelly, but it was it was a fairly common thing out there, to the point where all John Dee had to do was put an ad out for a medium, and people knew what that was, and there were professional mediums out there. So, and often they used children. And so I was like, well, this is interesting, because we can use the hypnosis and and if you take somebody that is intuitive and you put them in a hypnotic state, it should help the process. And so that's my wife. My wife is very intuitive and a powerful witch in her own right. And so we decided to try this. I showed her the show, and she was like, "Oh, that's cool. I would like to. Yeah, let's do that." And I explained the history, especially with John Dee and the angels, and she was like, "Oh, this is awesome. We got to do this." And so we went with Raziel for the first one. It was just like, well, obviously we'll talk to Raziel. And so we did we cleared the house and of all parasites. I smoked the house down with sage, and then I did a full ritual, to bring Raziel in, and then did the path working to walked her, hypnotized her, walked her through the path working so that she would encounter Raziel. I was expecting to ask her the question, then have her, and then have Raziel answer, and have her repeat the answer to me. But what ended up happening, because again, she's got most of the attunements that I do, including Raziel was one of the first ones, and so that kind of kicks on almost automatically sometimes when you work with a spirit, and so it used that and their connection that she's had with working with Raziel over the years. Raziel just kind of came inside and spoke through her. Now, you always have to remember when that happens that it's always coming, the raw intelligence of that spirit is now having to be filtered through the human brain, and not from that specific human brain and what information she has. It's very difficult for a spirit to put a brand new idea into somebody's head. It can happen, but it's usually a process. And anyway, but so we're talking to Raziel, and I'd already on the Patreon, I'd asked people to give questions, and we had some questions I never would have thought to ask, and actually I didn't think we would get a good answer for them, but some of those questions became, we got some really fascinating answers. And in the main thing is that this worked by using this process of hypnosis and path working and the ritual, and I'm holding the space. I'm able to interview the Archangel Raziel, and then we did this with Lucifer, and we've done it with Metatron and Michael and Payman and all of these different spirits, and kind of got a rundown, a brief overview of how the universe works, at least the parts that I was interested enough to be able to ask and know to ask. And there's always more questions, there's always more layers. We're never going to know everything, but I got a brief summary almost of how everything works. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about here on this podcast is kind of for taking from all the different sources that I've got, and I can talk about a different topic and explain how that works and what the spirits told me about such things like the higher self, the holy guardian angel, what happens when you die, reincarnation, the outer world versus the inner world, and things of that nature. And there's so much that we can talk about that I want to share with you guys. And so that's the main thing that this is going to be. We're going to talk about those specific topics, and not from specifically my point of view, but from the information that I've got from these angels and demons and these spirits. And so that was the one of the other major things that had happened. And then the next big major key that has not the whereas those, when I wrote those spirit interviews and I put those out on my blog and stuff, and those became very popular, but I haven't put them on a book or anything yet. It's still fairly new, but that's been another big milestone in our professional life. The next big thing that happened, I haven't really told too many people about. It's one of those things that's really hard to talk about, but it seems to be moving me in another direction once again. And so, and in a way that I'm getting kind of more intuitive information about how things work, and experiential. So what had happened was I still do a lot of different meditations, and I was actually listening to David Smith talk about one of his latest books, Black Aether, which is about the clip-art. Sorry, if you hear stomping around, it's my dog. She's restless. So anyway, David Smith, he's talking about the clip-off and how he interprets the metaphor of the clip-off as anything that it's actually really hard to explain what David Smith says. He has it's a long process, but we'll have to explain non-dual reality another time and what the clip-off is. So it's not necessarily important for you to know what a clip-off is and to a contemplative mystic, but it's imagine though that everything has a shell around it that gives it its shape and meaning. Take a can of soda. It has, you look at it, you think it's a can, you feel it, you touch it, feels like a can, looks like a can, acts like a can, but really it's God. Because everything is the divine. Everything is actually the divine. But we can't sense the divine. It's supernatural. It's beyond nature. So you can't measure it, you can't see it, you can't taste it. It's nothing. And you'll hear in some religions they'll call it the void. And I was listening to him, and he was talking about this process that he does where you can release the clip off that's holding that form in, and where you can experience the full divinity that's held within an object. And it did that. And like my desk, one by one, each part of my desk, like the keyboard, the mouse, all the little things that I have on my desk, the computer monitor, they all just started to vanish to me in a very real sense. They started to vanish, and there was just nothing. And I started to get a sense that there was nothing, and I was falling into nothing. And it was really horrifying. It wasn't most of my mystical practice and stuff has led me to see the divine as something life affirming. This didn't feel life affirming. It was pretty horrifying, and I was pretty shaken, and it really took me a while to kind of believe in reality again. And like on a physical level, it just took a few hours, but as far as the spiritual world, I was like, well, if physical reality is that's fragile and non-existent, the spiritual world must just be completely in our head. But so it took me a couple of weeks to kind of come to grips with the whole thing. And that was just the first step. And then after that, I had another experience in a meditation that was way more profound. Kind of the same thing happened, And I went away. I went so deep and so far out of myself that I forgot I was a person. And I know that that sounds insane, but I literally, there was nothing but light. This white light, this gentle white light was all there was. And at the same time, it was complete darkness. So it was like a darkness that was also at the same time a white shining light. And again, I'm not seeing this. It's not with my eyes. It's when you meditate, what you do is you're basically trying to shut yourself down to some degree, and what's left wells up around you and overwhelms the little you, and that bigger you kind of takes over. And I was lost inside of that, and then that you that is connected to the divinity, and so I was completely lost within that, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know I was a person. I was just in this light. And then there was a pattern. I saw a pattern in the light, almost like, you know how when you're in a swimming pool and there's water or something, and light goes through, the way the light refracts. It was like that, only it was like a blue pattern, but in that kind of watery pattern. And so there was this blue pattern in the white light, and I kind of recognized I was the pattern. That was my pattern. That pattern was me. And I realized, and I knew I had a job to do. I had a responsibility. I knew that there was something that I had to do, and that sense of responsibility kind of was like, I need to go back and I need to finish this, or accomplish this. And so around that idea, I began to kind of crystallize around that idea. And at first it was just sort of like a fractal. And at this point it is visual. Once the pattern started to form, that's when it became a visual experience. And so then it became a fractal that crystallized and became, it was almost like there was this part of divinity that's this always open, flowing power and light that, and it's full of complete potential. And it became, some of that potential slowed and it allowed it to become something, and it became me. And so that was, and then I kind of, came out of it from that, and it was like, oh, it's me again. And it was the most deeply profound experience that I can describe. And, one of those, like, just a truly life-changing type experience. And since then, I feel a connectedness to things that I'd never felt before, and things are working for me that had been difficult before. I'm not trying to say I'm some perfect enlightened saint or anything. That's not it. I'm just trying to say, I just want to try to articulate that something has happened and something is happening. I want you all to experience this for yourselves. And so that's is yet another reason that I'm doing this podcast, and we're going to talk about all of the different things that get us there. And one of the things that we're going to that I want to do is we're going to have, I'm going to talk about these very deep mystical things, but then we're going to also stop, and at the end of every show we're going to talk about something practical. So that's what I want to do now. We're going to talk about a practical practice that you can do on your own, and we're going to talk about meditation. Oh, I had said that there was one more, that I was going to talk about Hakma with this. So in Damien Eccles' book on Raziel, he starts talking about Raziel and Hakma, and he says, Hakma is also the energy behind the magician card in the tarot, the energy that reaches out into the universe to put things in motion. However, keep in mind that Hakma, there is no more you, which is why it was from here that Christ said, I and the Father in one. The place where the illusion of the ego once existed becomes completely filled by the divine. And it's in Hakma where the distinction between creator and creation dissolves. And so, yeah, I believe that what I experienced in that was yet another instance of, even though it wasn't explicitly with Raziel, I think by working so much with Raziel, and my goal has been wisdom, that through the different practices I was able to briefly lose myself in Hakma. That's kind of the idea of what that is. And so yeah, and that's something that I do really want anyone to be able to experience, and for everyone to have it. And so yeah, we're going to talk about meditation in the most basic form, so that you can begin this practice, hopefully, and you're gonna keep doing this, and then we'll talk about different practices you can add to it. So, but this is foundational. This is the foundation of everything else. And meditation is hard. It's hard for everybody. And I know that's even harder if you have ADHD, but it's hard. It is hard for everyone. There's no one on this planet that finds meditation easy, until maybe they've done it a whole lot, then it's easier, but it's still not something that's intuitive. You're not like, I'm really good at meditation. It's like, no, you're not. You practice, and hopefully you have moments of where you're great, but then sometimes it's still a struggle, and it's that constantly going back to it and struggling through it that is the practice. So don't feel like because you're not doing it, or you don't feel like you're doing it, that you're not doing it. But that's the point of doing it and failing to do it, and you go back and you try it again and you fail to do it. And like, for the most part, usually I can only clear my mind for just a few seconds at a time. Sometimes something amazing happens and it lasts longer, and then something mystic, and sometimes some crazy mystical experience like that happens. But for the most part, I still struggle with it every single time I meditate. And so here's the process. It's very simple. People love to make this more complicated than it needs to be. But all you need to do is sit down. You can sit in a chair. You don't have to sit, with your legs folded unless you want to. Then, that's fine. But the main thing is you want to sit with your back where your back can be straight, because breathing is important, and you want to breathe from your diaphragm. Most people, it's probably because we don't want to look fat, and so we don't want to stick our bellies out whenever we breathe. So we breathe with our shoulders. Our shoulders go up and down. But that's incorrect, and that's learned behavior. Babies, when they breathe from their diaphragm, and their bellies move up and down. And this is true not just in meditation. Whenever you learn to scuba dive, they're going to try to teach you to breathe properly. Or when you sing, you need to know how to breathe properly. And so you breathe with your diaphragm so that your belly goes in and out, and you want to breathe, and that way it'll fill all, and with your back straight, you're going to fill all of your lungs up with air. And you're not just going to use like the little top parts, you'll use all of your lungs. And we're not even going to get into the energetic aspects of meditation right now. We're just going to work on the mind. And so what you do, you sit down with your back straight, and you breathe normally, and you say a phrase. It can be any phrase you want. I have found in my own personal experience that the vowel sound ah, when said when you inhale, tends to kind of be a shortcut. It helps you get there. So if you can find a word or a phrase that has that ah sound that you can pair with the inhale, it will help. The mantra that I was initially taught was Maranatha, which is it's the last word in the Bible, and it means come Lord. But you don't have to use that. You can use whatever you want. And then what I do is I sync each syllable up with an inhale or an exhale. So it's like ma, ra, na, fa. And you just think about your word. Try not to think about anything else. You're going to fail. Your mind is going to think about something else. The key is then to label your thought, stop and say, I'm thinking, and then go back to your word. And you might only be able to think about it for one more syllable before your brain goes back to something else and starts thinking about, what you need to do that day, or what you're going to eat, or what so-and-so is thinking about you. And it doesn't matter. Just stop, say you're thinking, and go back to your word. And you want to do this for 20 minutes. Ideally, you're going to get up to 30 minutes twice a day. But, I know you're busy. You need to build in at least one session, though. And that's it. That's really all there is. You don't need to try to put a lot of different types of practice onto it. You just sit down, try to, you can do it in as quiet as you want, but I learned how to do it in a prison, a very loud prison, where people are slamming dominoes and they got Jerry Springer playing on the TV real loud. It was not a pleasant experience, but I learned how to do it there. And if I can learn how to do it there, you can learn how to do it in your own home. And you just got to do the work. And I know that I'm talking about earlier on, I was talking about the student that's doing the work because his teacher told him to. And it's like, sometimes you got to have the discipline to do it. And whenever you do something like this, you need to give it a month. And don't change your word for a month. And if you do change your word or phrase, your mantra, just stick with it for about a month. You need to give it that time to sink in. If you want to use magical mantras, Baal Kadmon has different books on mantras that you could incorporate into it. You can create your own, and we'll talk about that maybe next episode, mantras and sigils and stuff. But just this is key. This is foundational. What it does is it teaches you to focus, because to do complicated magic, you're going to need to be able to focus and use your mind, control your mind, so that it doesn't just run away and do whatever it wants to do, so that you know how to stay focused. And meditation is how you learn to do that. But at the same time, it's going to give you a lot of other stuff. It's going to be a moment of peace in a hectic world. It'll be kind of an oasis of peace for you. It's going to teach you that your emotions don't rule you. I remember having the thought that, because I've always struggled with depression, and depression would come on and it would be like a cloud in front of the sun and darken everything. But then I learned that with meditation, through my meditation practice, I learned that if I didn't feed into it, that it would just pass away like a cloud in front of the sun. It would just keep on moving unless I fed into it. And so you need to, and that's just one of the benefits that's going to come, is you're going to learn to control your emotions. It's going to help you with your depression or your anxiety or whatever else is plaguing you, that's plaguing your life and your emotional life. And again, and then you're going to be able to focus on your magical practices much stronger, and you'll be able to make things happen with your mind a lot more. But that's a little bit further down the road. So that's it for this first episode. I think that hopefully you have a basic idea of kind of who I am, where I'm coming from, and what we want to accomplish here. And the one thing that I would like to make a promise about here is that what I'm not going to do is badmouth other spiritual teachers or occultists or authors. I might disagree with somebody and give and give an alternate version of something or just disagree with what somebody says or does. But I'm never going to tell you that they're a fraud or a fake just because I disagree with what they're saying. There are plenty of occultists out there that I disagree with, but I don't and I think that maybe their motivations might not be completely genuine, but I don't think that they're fakes either. And then just some would just have different ideas of what magic is and what it's for and stuff. And I'm going to disagree, and that they can disagree, and it's fine. But I'm just making this promise that I'm not going to turn this show into a I'm right, they're wrong, and this is why you shouldn't listen to them type deal. That's ugly, and it's pointless, and we're not going to do that kind of thing around here. And the dogs are going nuts. So I think it's time for me to sign off. I thank you so much for spending time with me and listening to me talk about these things, and I hope that you come back and we can continue to explore these things, all this amazing stuff together. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.